Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And I want to thank Lauren for having us, asking us to do a couple presentations this week. I'm Mike Adams, Impact Evaluation and Process Management for the Missouri Small Business Development Centers. And I also work in workforce development. And my colleague, Rob.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rob Russell. I'm an assistant extension professor in the Truman School of Government and Public Affairs here at Mizzou, and I'm also the director of Extension's Labor and Workforce Development Program, and we work closely with the SBDC and other folks around the state to tackle workforce issues broadly.
Thanks, Rob. So this morning, we're going to go over hiring and retention issues and tools. Rob and I developed a tool about 3 years ago now, I think it was, Rob, and we call it workforce matchmaking. And that's going to be the crux of today's presentation. And it's developed to help with recruiting, hiring, and retention. Next slide. So we're going to kind of take a different approach on how we do this. We want to show how we evaluate talent. So our first person here, we're going to use sports to do this, and we'll get into why we're using sports. So the first person is your ideal candidate as a quarterback in the NFL. 6'5", 235 pounds, physically imposing, very natural gifted, strong arm, shows good touch, can change up the speed on the ball, huge upside, and is conceivably he could be one of the best QBs in the next 2 or 3 years. Perceived not all, but downside, perceived as not always an easy guy to work with. Seems to be nagging questions about what his work ethic is, what's missing, but it's hard to verbalize what that is that's missing. The next person, only 6 foot, small for a quarterback, 213 pounds. But he has good touch, kind of a touch passer, not the strongest arm, but he does hit his receivers in stride. Doesn't possess ideal height for a quarterback, and a quarterback in the NFL ranks, you want somebody that's 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". He kind of sidearms it and doesn't really have a good arm angle, things of that nature. But he's a confident leader, and he knows how to take command. The other thing is, he takes charge. He's like, this is my team kind of thing. So which one would you want? The first one, the 6'5", 235 pounds with all the gifts in the world, is Ryan Leaf. For anybody that knows who Ryan Leaf is, he was the number 2 overall pick in 1998, but he only played 25 games, only had 655 attempts, and very little stats to go with it. So what we would call kind of a bust, even though he had all the qualities you're looking for in someone, that person just did not work out. And the other person was Drew Brees. He was the number 32 overall pick. That's the second round. He played 284 games, had 7,800 completions, 79,000 yards, which is the most in NFL all time, 565 touchdown passes to only 240 interceptions, and he won a Super Bowl, and he won an MVP, and he's the 2-time Offensive Player of the Year. And he was a Walter Payton Man of the Year, which means he gives back to the community, and he's rewarded for giving back to the community. So even though he didn't have the same qualities as the first person, that doesn't necessarily translate into what's going to be your best coworker or best worker. So sports. Why are we talking sports? Are you on the wrong call? No, you're not. And here is why. Sports teams have some of the most sophisticated systems to identify talent. They spend millions and millions of dollars to identify talent. Now, we're not asking you, obviously, to spend millions of dollars, but it is an ongoing process. It is commitment, it is recruiting, it is advertising, it is getting your brand out there, and the process never starts. You're always looking for talent. You know, Rob and I come across folks that are like, I just can't find the right people to hire. Well, there's a process to it. You need to get your name out there. You need to get your company out there. Focus on building awareness, develop systems to identify players that will work within the constraints of what you do. So the point being is the process never stops. You always have to be looking for that next talented person.
And the other part is that culture matters, right? I mean, it's not just about identifying the right talent, right? But it's about identifying the right talent for your organization with who you need at that time. And I love this quote from Mizzou football coach, Coach Drinkwitz, when he came a couple of years ago, right? He says, like, you know, you've got to find that right fit. I'm not the right fit for everybody, and our culture is not the right fit for everybody, and that's okay, right? It is okay for somebody that looks great on paper to not fit with you. But what you need to do, and what Coach Pinkel did well at Mizzou, is find people who work here at Mizzou and then develop them to the max capacity, right? Like, one of the things that they talk about Mizzou football and what happened here is that people, they took the low rank, the 3-star player out of Texas, right, and turned him into an all-American, first round, second round draft choice who had a successful NFL career. That's a culture, and that's finding people who fit into your culture. And when Mizzou has faltered is when they've deviated from that culture. They've deviated from that pipeline. They've deviated from that path, and you see that sort of stuff. And so that's the other part of that matters, right? It's looking for people that meet the criteria, but also thinking about how do they fit with your company and the organization that you have.
So development is extremely important. So once you get that talent in, you identify that talent, you get them into the company. You know, they may start at a certain level, but you want them to progress to another level. Personal experience. When I first started at the University of Missouri, I was a temporary employee 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And now I'm senior state leadership in my job. You know, so I was developed to do what I do now. And so it's not just identifying that talent, but it's utilizing that talent. You know, the can't misses miss. We have to understand the can't misses miss, and Mr. Irrelevant can become a star. If anybody doesn't know what Mr. Irrelevant is, that's the last person drafted in an NFL draft. But they can become a star. And so you have to identify that talent, what that person does well, what they don't do well, which is fine. You know, they may not do things well, but identifying what they do well is just as important. Okay, how can I take this and elevate them to a place where they are being successful and they're helping my company be successful? So that's kind of, and culture matters, like Rob said. You know, it's all about that culture of, do I just want somebody to come in and punch a clock from 8 to 5 and that's it? Or do I want somebody that, you know, can fit in with our culture and help us grow and help them grow?
So one area when we talk to business owners about how to identify and recruit talent and retain it, one of the things that I like to talk about is the talent funnel here, right? And what we see is a lot of businesses pay attention to this area down here. They pay attention to the recruiting, what's labeled recruiting on the screen here. So the application, the evaluation of talent, and the hiring of people, right? So you'll put up your sign out there that says we're hiring, or you'll do it, you know, historically an ad in the newspaper, or now you do something on monster.com or Indeed or whatever website you use there that says we want you to apply for a job here. You then take the resumes that you get, you evaluate the folks that are there, and if there's somebody that meets your needs, you end up hiring them, right? But as we're thinking about talent, the real key to talent and building that pipeline is what is called recruitment marketing on this slide, right? It's about building awareness, consideration, and interest of your entity as a place to work that starts well before you have openings, that starts well before you have jobs available, so that when you are putting out applications there, you are getting the best people that you can. One of the experiences that my wife and I have had over the years is we've moved since we've been married, we've moved to 4 different cities. We've lived in the Iowa City, Iowa area. We lived in Madison, Wisconsin. We lived in St. Louis, and now we live in Columbia. And every time we have moved for my job. I'm very lucky that she's able to move with that. But every time we've moved, we've asked the question of where can she work? And there's awareness about big companies. So here in Columbia, there was awareness at the university, Boone Hospital, state government if we wanted to commute to Jeff City, and awareness of Veterans United and Shelter and companies like that. But there's very little awareness of smaller companies within those communities there. And so the key part of building a talent funnel is helping build awareness of your organization so that people will actually consider working there, and then they are interested in looking at that. And so when you have a position that's open there, then people are applying. And that's a key part of thinking about is how do you deepen this process? And again, I say this, it's easy to say, it's hard to do, but it's a long-standing investment in a process in order to make sure that you are known as an employer, both within the industry that you work, but also within that broader community as people are looking for jobs and thinking about places to work.
So one thing to keep in mind when we're thinking about recruiting and hiring is evaluate what you have currently. What are your current employees' strengths, weaknesses, things of that nature? Do you need more employees? Do you need less employees? And just kind of use that to make decisions when recruiting and hiring. What are your needs? Again, that goes back to where are your needs within your workforce? Do you need somebody frontline? Do you need somebody back office? Do you need somebody that can help strengthen, management or things of that nature? And then as far as recognizing the competitive environment, what other companies are you competing with? We run into a lot of times in kind of the more rural areas where there's a lot of manufacturing, manufacturer A, because they can't compete because they only pay $12 an hour because manufacturer B pays $15 an hour. So you have to recognize that. Who are you competing against? Who are the employees wanting to go to? So just evaluate, okay, this is what B is doing. Now I have to maybe do this. And that kind of gets into the business model thing, which we're not going to get into today. But it's very important to understand who is in your region that you are competing for employees with. What does your current employee recruitment look like? Are you just posting on ZipRecruiter or Indeed.com, something like that? Are you actually going out into the community and actively recruiting? And that's one thing we really like to discuss is that active recruiting. So active recruiting can be something like going to a car show. If you need a mechanic in your shop, go to a car show where there's quote unquote gearheads and say, hey, you seem to be really good at this and I need a mechanic. Would you be interested in this job? So getting creative, current employee recruitment is very, very important. And again, we've already talked about the employee development. Once you get a good employee into your company, are you doing anything to help develop them? Is it mentoring? Is it professional development? Anything like that? Is there a process for pay raises or raising up inside the company? So that's very, very important as well. So again, kind of going back to the last slide, you want to map your current workforce, and Rob's going to get into this in a lot more detail here on the next couple of slides. What positions and job titles do you currently have? What positions and job titles are you looking for in the future? What are you going to be hiring for? Do you have an organizational chart to where you can see where everybody fits into the system? Now, are your needs being met by your current workforce? This is very, very important. Is your production down? Are your sales down? Or are your sales up? Or are they even because of what your workforce is doing at the time? Do you need to hire more? And what positions do you need to hire for? Who are your best performers? And again, Rob is going to get into this a lot more here on the next couple slides. Look at the tangibles. Okay, this is what they do every day. They come into work. They're well dressed. They're on time. They leave, maybe 10 minutes late or whatever it may be, and they perform this task very well. Intangibles. Well, I guess it kind of goes back to going, they have good communication. They work well with their coworkers, things of that nature. These are what we call more the soft skills, where tangibles are hard skills. Intangibles are what we call soft skills. What contribution do they bring to the company? Are they helping me, grow? Are they helping me make money? Are they good with customers? Things of that nature. And then personality, again, that goes back to more of that communication. They don't just sit in the broom closet and work all day. They're mingling with workers. They're co-working very well. Who are the adequate performers? So these would be the folks that maybe don't have quite all of the skills that I just mentioned, but they do fine. They come into work, they do their job, and they go home. That's fine. And then challenges. Who are the ones that you always have to get onto because they're not doing what they need to be doing? So identifying those different things will help you in the hiring process, hiring and retention process moving forward. So what skills do you need your employees to have? That's something that's a big question. And again, we're going to get into this in the chart that we're going to look at. It's very important to understand, you're not just hiring somebody to hire somebody. And I know right now, hiring is tough for a lot of industries and a lot of companies because folks just really aren't ready to go back to the workforce. We understand that, but it's still important to understand that the skills that your employees have or you need for your employees to have before you hire someone. Granted, you can train a lot of people up. There are a lot of companies that, if they have this certain skill, I can train them to do whatever I need them to do. But at the same time, there are other companies that are like, I need to have this specific skill set before I hire them. So it's really important to identify that skill set. And then what kind of training capacity do you have? Do you need somebody that just comes in right away and can hit the ground running? Or, do you have the capacity to, like I said, if you have this one certain skill or these 2 or 3 different skills, I can train you up to do what I need you to do. So that's important to understand what your capacity is there. Kind of what we mentioned on the last slide, essential hard skills, or the tangibles, education. Do they need a degree? Do they not need a degree? Do they need to be from a trade school, not from a trade school, apprenticeship, whatever it may be? Kind of same with the credentials. Do they need a certain certification to be able to do the job? And then do they have to have a certain job experience before they come in? Or can we just start from the ground up and train them to do the job? And then more of your intangibles, your soft skills would be, can they be an independent worker? If you need an independent worker, what is their learning capacity? Do they have the skill to eventually become a leader within the company? Do they have good time management? Or are they just kind of, always behind or ahead, whatever it may be, but can they manage their time on their own? And then attendance and punctuality, which speaks for itself.
So Mike, I just want to add real quick here to this slide that what we've been talking about previously and what you'll see us kind of going through in this tool is thinking about both what do your employees bring to the table, but you as a supervisor, as a business owner, what do you need from your employees? And what are those sort of key things that you have to have? And what are the things that you are able to train or willing to train? That's going to sort of guide the process of hiring for you. It should guide how you think about job descriptions. It should guide your evaluation process, and it should really guide then how you bring people even on board. That you need to think about, again, this is what somebody's brought to the table here. What do I need and where do I need them to get, and how do I get them into that direction? And so that's kind of a key part of this is thinking about both the external candidate, but also thinking about yourself and evaluating that yourself. So one of the things that Mike's talked about that we're going to get into here is that we've developed a tool here that we can make available through the SBDC for you to do use cases, right? To really think about what value are you looking at here, what do you need, and what do you bring to the table as a part of this conversation in the exact same way that you would do this for your business, figuring out your product, right? So you evaluate your business, you go through, you evaluate your idea, you go through use cases, you figure out where your value lies vis-a-vis other businesses, and you try to develop a market and a plan to reach that market. And we're talking about doing the same thing for your workforce, right? Because the one thing we do know, and I can tell you, unfortunately, the workforce issues are not going to get better in the short term. We know that there are fewer people going through high school now than there were 5 to 10 years ago. We know that there are fewer people in Missouri in grade school than there were 5 to 10 years ago, and so we have fewer people entering the workforce. At the same time, we have a large number of people who are exiting the workforce that are the baby boomers that are retiring and moving on with their life. And so really kind of thinking through and spending the same time that you do developing your product as you're developing your workforce is going to be a key part for business owners going forward here and figuring out how to target what you were doing here. So what we've developed here is for multiple use cases, and we have an example. You can do this for your own workforce here, but you think about specific employees, and that's part of the key here. As Mike talked about, identifying your great performers, your adequate performers, and your challenges, right? Coming up with specific employees that you're talking about in each of these scenarios here to try and figure out who should we hire and who should we not hire as a part of the conversation. So here we see we've got an employee, Joe Smith. He's a CNC operator. Okay, what education did he have? He has a professional certificate. He has other credentials here. Length of service has been 3 years. Here are the listing of hard skills that we're looking at that he brings to the table. Here's the listing of soft skills that he seemingly brings to the table too. We try to evaluate work preference and style, supervision preference and style, previous work experience, and what you hope to get as insights, right? So the scenario that we came up with here is that Joe, this hypothetical employee, is successful in this position because of 3 things. First of all, the skill development that was available through State Fair Community College. Secondly, the ability to work with the team. And third, the attention to detail. So using this, you sort of started to hone in on a few key things, right? So that our most successful employees seem to go through State Fair's skill development program, right? Or they are team members here, or they have an attention to detail. And then there are ways that you can start to then use that information to go forward to better comprehend what you should be looking for in your hiring process there. If you want folks who have that skill, then you need to make sure that in your job description and in your process, you are privileging that they have a professional certificate in machine tool technology. You can't necessarily say where you want it from, but that is a credential that you are looking for, and that is a hard skill that you need there. The other part of the conversation then is again, we focus on the employees, and then we focus on you as a business and thinking about the competitive environment and what does it actually mean for you as a business. Who are you competing with for talent? What are your advantages and disadvantages as an employer? Are you competitive in wages, benefits, and other perks? That's a baseline area right there. Is your company known in your area and outside your area? Are you what I would call a destination employer? My college roommate lives in St. Louis, and he always said that he got a job right out of college working for AB, Anheuser-Busch, and he said that there was only one place he would leave Anheuser-Busch for, and that was to work for the St. Louis Cardinals. So Anheuser-Busch was a destination employer, at least in his mind, in that community. And one of the real key parts of this is would your current workforce recommend you as a place to work, and why or why not? One of the things that Mike and I see across the board and argue for is that your best way to recruit employees is by having people work there talk about what a great place you are to work for. Tell their friends and family that, hey, you should get a job here at this company because they take care of you. It's a great place to work for. When an opening comes up, then be like, hey, here's an opening. Will you circulate this and share that information here? Because if you're doing that, then your network that you have is doing the work for you of identifying and bringing in talent for you to evaluate. And that's kind of a key aspect to it here. And so the second part to this, this document that we have available for businesses to use is to really start to think about those competition questions and why are people choosing to work for you, and what is your company looking like? So what attracted those employees to work for the company, right? In some cases, it's working closer to home. We see continually that people will take a hometown discount. It doesn't mean that they'll work for free, but they will take a hometown discount. And you think about the competitive environment here in what I call the mid-Missouri metropolitan area, there's a whole lot of commuting back and forth between Columbia and Jeff City. And if somebody lives in Columbia but works in Jeff City, they might not need a dollar for dollar exchange to work in Columbia, but they can't be paid 50% of what they're going to be paid in Jeff City to work in Columbia either. And I see that across the board here. What's the market competition look like for those skill set, right? Is there a lot of competition for folks with those skills? Is there limited? Is there minimal competition? What you see at a regional level, the same sort of thing at a national level, right? So think about it where I live here in Columbia. Local is the Columbia area. Regional, though, is going to include Fulton, Jeff City, Sedalia, Moberly, maybe down to the lake there. What does that regional competition look like there? And then at a national level, what do you see there? And particularly in an online environment that we are in, for some businesses, there is going to be a national competition for the workers that you are trying to attract. For highly skilled workers, we are seeing this more and more that people that are skilled, and whether that means they have a 4-year degree, whether they have a lot of experience, whether they have gone through an apprenticeship program or whatever, if they have skills, then people are recruiting them on a national level to come and work for them because there is such a shortage of folks with those skills there. Ask yourself the question then, as a part of this evaluation, is why do people stay employed with your company? I think that's an important question to always ask yourself, is what is the reason that somebody is staying here and how can we keep them here if they're good, right? It could be for family reasons. It could be for a whole host of different things. It could be that they don't have that actually getting their resume together is harder than it is to actually than what the pain point is for their job, right? So you want to keep them at that point in time. You want to retain them if they are good employees there. Talking about internal opportunities for advancement is important also. One of the things that's a real challenge for smaller businesses is that they tend to be flat organizationally, right? And so what that means is that you hire in somebody to work for you, they can be great, but there's no chance for them to advance to get more responsibility down the road. And so as a business owner, as a manager, you have to think about how can we help add responsibilities to someone's plate that we want to keep so that they remain interested in the job and they don't start looking for other jobs there. I can get, and that can be formal conversations, it can be informal conversations, but it needs to be intentional in terms of what you're doing. I left a job once, and when I left, the employer that I'd come up through them, they said, Rob, we can't believe you're leaving. We had big plans for you. And I said to them, we never talked about those plans. You never told me what your plans were for me. So all I saw was that I was going to be doing the same thing for the next 10 years. And maybe if at that point in time, I would get another job in the organization where I would be doing that for another 10 years. And maybe if I'm lucky, then something down the road could happen. But you never talked to me about what you saw for my future. You never told me that when you sent me to this event that you saw that as professional development. I perceive that as being, well, they can't find anybody else to go, so I'm the low man on the totem pole and I've got to go, right? So that conversation is important here. And then coming back from a business perspective about what insights can you gain, about why people are staying in your company here. So we came up with, again, a scenario here, but the key part of this is thinking through this intentionally, doing this for multiple employees and trying to gain those insights about who do you need to hire and why are they going to come and work for you and why are they going to stay with you is really a key part. And I think that a lot of businesses don't think about that part of the process, right? They don't evaluate why somebody comes and works with them, why they're going to stay, and what do we bring to the table for that workforce there. Once you've done this, then you can actually spend your time recruiting, right? You can actually spend your time being more effective with the recruitment that you're doing and spending less time just casting a wide net. Going back to our sports analogy, when you talk about, you see the sort of the blue blood programs that have their recruiting down pat. They don't send out 1 million offers, right? They send out a handful of offers to key people that they expect to get, and they put a full court press into that group and getting them onto their campus or into their employment there. So when you know what you're looking for, where are you going to find them? And a couple of things that we have to talk about here. First of all, you've got to be proactive, right? The era of sitting back and waiting for people to come and find you to work is over. That's not how the world is going to work this day and age. So you have to create brand awareness, both as your company as a place to buy a product, but also as a place to work. You can never stop recruiting. Mike and I talk about with different businesses that we'll tell them, when you're going through a drive-through, if you get great customer service for somebody, give them your card and say, hey, if you're ever looking for another job, we would love for you to come work for us here. Going to car shows that Mike said is another example, and just again passing out that information, but you looking at every opportunity as an intentional chance to build awareness of your company, to build your awareness of your company as a place to work, and then to identify those employees that you think are great or potentially could be great to come in there. Capitalizing on your current network of current and former employees is key there, and then being creative, right? And there's a million ways that creativity can be deployed in this era, but don't just wait around. Don't just do what you've done, right? Don't just put the ad in the newspaper, put your sign out that says now hiring, have a little sign there. Be creative about how you attract and retain employees, and think through that as a marketing point for your company. Once you identify employees, then we've got to get a reference to the Godfather in here. Make them an offer they can't refuse, right? Now that's got to make sense for your business, right? You can't, it's got to make financial sense for you. And I'm not telling you to bankrupt your business here, but what I see a lot of times now is that, and we're going to talk about compensation and things like that tomorrow as part of this HR series, and how do you figure out what is competitive compensation, benefits, and things like that. But don't lowball somebody, right? Make them feel like you want them, that you're putting on the full court press to get them, and that you are the person that they can't imagine anybody else coming to work. You cannot imagine anybody else coming to work for you, right? So don't say, yeah, you're the best employee we're ever going to get. What's your offer? Well, it's $12 an hour, right? No, make them an offer they can't refuse, so that they know you want them to come work for you here. And then invest in people, right? And that's one of the key parts. And there's a mentality part of this that I think is key to this. I hear businesses all across the country talk about that. They worry that they're going to send somebody, they're going to train them up, and that person's going to leave. And guess what? That is going to happen. That is reality in this day and age. But that's been reality for decades, right? On Thursday, we'll be talking about generations in the workforce, and we're doing a different take on it, right? And talking about different age groups and what does that mean for you here. But one of the things you have to think about is, I love this quote here, is what happens if we invest in developing our people and they leave us, and then the CEO says, what if they stay and we don't invest in them, right? So investing in people and recognizing that some folks might leave, but you're also going to help develop your employees, and they're going to make better employees, is a key part of the process here. As a part of that, then you have to plan for development, right? So you have to think through when you're hiring somebody here and bringing them on board. You have to set clear expectations. You have to think about their importance in retaining institutional knowledge, and you have to think actually about the costs that you have in hiring too, right? So development, and Mike and I would argue that retention and development of employees is a much more cost-effective strategy for businesses than going out and hiring new employees. There's some stats out there. I know that for fast food workers, there's research out there that says it's about $1 an hour is the cost of hiring a turnover for a fast food employee. So you can take that and figure that out for your own business too. You need to think about what training does that new hire need, who is going to do it, how is it going to get done, and how long do they need it for there, right? You have to think about how much ongoing professional development are you willing to provide? Are there additional credentials that you're going to send somebody to get there? How are you going to help them adapt to new technology? Are there entities such as as different training centers that are going to help them get that information there? And then an important part is mentoring, right? And that's both internal and external mentoring. Mentoring, I would argue, actually should even stop. If we go back to the funnel, it should start with people that are potential employees. And if you can mentor them along into your workforce, then you're helping yourself out in the long term. But also then, how do we internally mentor along people and bring them along in the workforce? Do we need people outside of our organization or internally to bring this forward here? One example I always like to tell my brother-in-law, who's an attorney in the Kansas City area, but I've known him since he was 15 years old. He's wanted to be an attorney since he was 15 years old. He went to law school at a fancy private law school. And after his first year, a firm where I grew up, which is Raleigh, tried to hire him in, and he listened really nicely, and he liked working there. And he said, no, thanks, you can't pay me enough. And that mentoring if that would have started with him in high school, then they would have helped him think about decisions he could have made, law school choices he could have made, so that when it came time to do that hiring, he would have been ready for them to move into that workforce. I have seen that work in other areas with a friend who's an OBGYN who knew from the time that she started med school, actually before she went to med school, that the local OBGYN group in her hospital wanted her to come back. And so she had that plan there. So mentoring, both long-term and short-term and internal mentoring, is a key part of this conversation here. And then taking care of your employees. I like this quote here from Richard Branson, the head of the Virgin Group, a billionaire, that is key. That he always says, making sure your staff is taken care of first, because if your staff's taken care of, your customer is taken care of. Second, your customer gets taken care of, and then your shareholders are happy. And that's kind of a key part of thinking through this process here, is that spending more time taking care of our staff and thinking through this more intentionality is going to oftentimes lead to more success down the road.
So kind of just to sum things up, we really, Rob and I put a lot of thought into this presentation in the tool. And we really, really feel that if you kind of follow the steps that we've laid out today, instead of getting what I would call a bust, NFL bust and Ryan Leaf, you would hopefully end up with this Super Bowl champion. So with that, we'll take any questions.
Hey, Mike, I have a question. What
Sure.
would you say to someone, let's just say maybe a small business, and they're going to hire maybe their first or second employee, and they feel like they don't have anything to offer to kind of recruit people to work for them. They can't pay them a lot. What would be your suggestion that they can do to kind of increase that so they can attract or maybe retain their workforce?
So I think that's a great question. That's an instance where you're looking for that raw talent. Somebody maybe doesn't have a lot of experience and is willing to come to work and learn. And that's a point where you train that person up so that at some point they do become that talented employee that you're looking for. It happens a lot. It's where you're just kind of looking for that, like I said, that raw talent, and I can train this person up to do a great job for my company. Rob, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I'll just say the other thing that I agree with what you said in terms of the raw talent, and you might not get somebody you're not going to get somebody that has 10 years experience, right? But at the same, more often than not. But what do you have to offer? You have to offer your vision, right? You have to offer the possibility of somebody coming in at the ground floor. I mean, of being employee number 2 at Google, right? Or being employed, something like that, right? And the opportunity to grow within that. You have the ability to give them a lot of experience that they wouldn't otherwise have, and to really work together in a business that's getting off the ground there. So I think that's the other part, is don't sell yourself short for that challenge, right? That there are people out there who prefer to work in smaller organizations. They like the flexibility and freedom it provides, and if you can sell them on your vision, then they are willing to take a chance for you. And that, again, that's particularly going to be with younger people that have a lot more raw skills and things like that they're going to be looking for that. But that's thinking through, how do you target and where do you find folks in terms of what's going there.
So another personal experience, I already talked about the SBDC. In 2000, I went to work for a private sector company, professional employer organization. I was the third person hired, very much a startup. 5 years later, we were a $100 million company because they just took a chance on a few people and we grew the heck out of it. So it's that kind of, and they trained us up. I learned the industry inside and out. Ended up being the operations manager. So it's just kind of identifying that young talent that you really feel will buy in, and like Rob said, give them your vision and say, here's where we're going. I want you on the ground floor, kind of thing.
The other part, Mike, I'll add, just to be creative. We'll talk more about compensation tomorrow, but that's a chance where you think about how do you help, how do you give a person, how do they help them buy into the business, right? Like, so maybe you can't compensate them effectively, but you can say, well, I'll give you, as part of this work here, you'll be a 10% silent partner in the business or whatever. I mean, thinking creatively in those sort of areas, endeavors is important too, right? And it doesn't mean you have to do that, but thinking through those different ways to compete in terms of bringing people in and tying them to the business too. And that's especially key for those early employees, I think.
Thanks, guys.
Anyone else? Brianna? Been kind of quiet.
Sorry, I'm just observing everything. You guys were amazing though, so I don't have any questions yet, but tomorrow I might have one.
Okay, well, I have another question then. Just signs of the time. So what's going on now? Do you guys have any suggestions or maybe any tips for hiring practices in a workforce that we have right now, where there's not really, it's pretty hard to find people to work, especially in rural areas. So do you have any suggestion on hiring or ways to kind of market to retain and attract the best type of employee?
So, yeah, I agree. I mean, right now, the market is not great for employees as far as companies hiring. And with the pandemic, I would say in the past, and Rob would probably agree with this, you have to sweeten the pot, so to speak. But right now, I don't know if that's possible. Sales are down and things of that nature. So I have not come up with a solution yet. I don't know if you have, Rob. I don't know if we've really even talked about this part of it.
I don't have a solution per se, but I think the solutions for businesses fall into several different things, right? So, and these are all, it's not a silver bullet, but a couple of things that you need to be paying attention to as a part of the process there. First of all, is making sure you're competitive in wages, benefits, and things like that. If you aren't there, then that's a part of the problem. And I've run across too many businesses across the state that can't figure out why they have workforce issues. And the first thing you talk about is compensation, and they are paying below their regional average for compensation. And so that's the issue, right? The second thing you need to think about then as a part of the process here is that one of the things we saw in with the pandemic is that where people lost jobs and where people are hiring right now don't oftentimes line up. So we know that there's, you can look at the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations unemployment claims, and we see that in Missouri that right now we're, as of the data that came out, I think it was January, that we were still 200% higher unemployment rate claims in accommodations and food services. So restaurants, hotels, things like that, and a few other industries, but manufacturing was actually down 15% year over year, right? So manufacturing is hiring and can't get enough people. And yet we have unemployment, from folks that are worked in restaurants and things like that. So as a business owner, thinking through like, okay, we might not be able to get somebody that brings in X, Y, and Z for skills, but they're good workers. They can show up on time. They can do this sort of stuff, and they've been working in food service. How do we bring them in? So thinking through that area. The final third area I would say is paying attention to what that commuting pattern looks like. And there's publicly available data you can get from the Census Bureau. It's called On the Map. You can figure out by community where people go to, where they come from, what jobs they're looking at. It's about 2 to 3 years old, so it's not real time data, but it gives you some pictures there. And then going out and trying to figure out how to recruit those folks, right? One of the examples I heard, there's a guy named Sean Siebert from Cuba, Missouri, who talks about this, that he identified that in Cuba that they were losing X number of people every day to St. Louis. And one of the things that he did is he went out to the gas station at rush hour time and would give his card out to folks and say, hey, if I can get you a job in Cuba that pays X, that does this, would you be interested in working here? And that was boots on the ground, sort of, hard work that he did, but that helped recruit folks for a business that he was trying to attract in that community there. And that's sort of the key things, some key areas that you can be paying attention to there.
Wow, that was awesome information. I'm actually taking notes right now just to help some clients. That's awesome information. And just the fact that you referenced knowing what jobs were lost and what your new potential workforce could actually be. So who you can recruit from, I think that's really powerful. And I just want to make sure I heard correct. You said we can get information from the Department of Labor on the jobs that were lost.
Yeah, I will actually, I can share, I did a brief on this. I can share that with you, Lauren. It talks about by industry. And again, like unemployment claims, we look great now compared to what we did a year ago at this time, right? Claims were up 5,000% a year ago, but I'll find it and I'll send it to you and you can share it with folks. That information is available by industry and you can see what's out there. And then, yeah, if you go to the Department of Labor, you can actually, they share that data publicly too, so.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, kind of piggyback. I mean, that kind of goes back to the whole theme of the presentation. What Rob was talking about is that creative recruiting, getting out there, getting in the community, not just kind of sitting back and waiting for people to come to you.
Thanks, Mike.
Anyone else?
There's a question in the chat. Let's see. It says, hey guys, got a question. How do small startups who are hiring for a position that fills multiple roles and skill sets determine compensation? Example, a software developer who also handles, say, social media.
It's a good question. So you would probably start. So we're going to talk about compensation and benefits tomorrow. I don't know, Matthew, if you're going to be on the call. I think where I would start would be with the software developer role. They compensate based on that and maybe bump a little bit for social media. I don't know. I don't know if the two are mutually exclusive. That's a good question. I really like that question. Let me think about that for a second. Rob, do you have any thoughts on it first?
Well, I mean, one thing I'll say, there's proprietary data out there that I know the SBDC, at least Mike has access to. And so, you know, you can work with a counselor and folks like that to kind of do a search for both, you know, they can look at both what's available in your local market, you know, in terms of compensation and things like that, that there's some limits to what people will share. But then you can also, you know, then you can also do a search by that at a state and national level sort of thing too. So that would be a spot I would start at. To see what that compensation looks like. I mean, to be honest, I would start looking at my competitors, right? And who are they hiring and what are they listing their jobs at? You know, one of the nice things about the publicly available information about hiring a lot more now is you can actually get information. You can do, you know, you can do industrial surveillance, right? Or, you know, without people keeping that proprietary, right? It's available publicly. So if you could start searching for some of that, I would look for that there and see what you could do. Those would be places I would start looking for that sort of stuff. And I would also then, you know, try to, and again, your SBDC counselors can help you think through some of that, or we can work with them in that sort of space to help think through some of that. There's other data out there. MERIC, the Missouri Economic Research and Information Center, which is part of state government, has information available for broad occupation categories online. It's not, you know, not niche sort of stuff, but you can get kind of what are the broad categories, and they'll do that by region, job center region, and things like that too. So,
and one thing I'll kind of add to that, just from the SBDC standpoint, is, you know, if you're a startup, it's kind of expected that you're going to have multiple roles when you start with them. So I'm not sure that the compensation is always going to reflect all of the roles that person is working in that space. Just to kind of put it harshly, I mean, it's just kind of the way it is. Lauren, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Eventually, obviously, that person will need to, be compensated. But, when they first started a startup, it's common for there to be multiple roles.
Yeah,
just
that's
kind of-
correct. That's correct. And Matthew, just a suggestion, some of the things that I walk my clients through is one, knowing what you can afford to pay. So knowing the low end and the high end. The next, and Rob kind of touched on this, is knowing what your competitors pay. So it is kind of hard when the person you're hiring is going to fill multiple roles or wear multiple hats. Sometimes it's a little bit easier when you're making these type of decisions to maybe break down in percentage how much time you think that person will spend on each role, and then try to compensate towards that majority. So let's just say marketing is one of those job hats that person would wear. Well, what's the going rate if they spend maybe 60% of their time filling that marketing role? What's the going rate for a marketer in your area? And you can kind of base it on that. But again, just kind of knowing what you can afford, low end and high end, and then knowing what your competitors pay, those are going to be the most important starting points. And yeah, Mike mentioned working with your local SBDC, we can help you, obtain some of that information and help you make a plan on hiring.
The other thing I'll just add quickly is what's just the pain point for you, right? And so in the job that you have highlighted out there, Matthew, what's the key skill set that you want them to bring? You want a software developer who can do social media, or do you want a social media person who can do some software development? That's something you have to evaluate there. And then you're probably going to want to think through what you're going to probably want to hire towards that pain point that you have from the business, right? So you're going to want to hire towards the software developer's salary. If that's going back to what Lauren said, if that's the majority of what they're doing, and that's really the kind of key pain point, that's where the shortage is, things like that you're looking for there. So. That's a great question, though.
Yeah, that was
Fantastic question.